The ringing of the phone shattered the calm of the Thursday morning routine. Jake hurriedly wiped pancake batter off his hands and glanced at the caller ID, puzzled to see an unfamiliar code. "Hello?" he answered cautiously, his heart quickening with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Jake, it's Maya," came his wife's voice through the receiver. Her tone, usually calm and composed, sounded slightly shaken. "Mia? Is everything okay?" Jake asked, immediately sensing something was wrong. I had a bit of a problem last night," Maya began, her voice trailing off hesitantly. "My purse got stolen when I was at the hotel lobby." Jake frowned, trying to piece together Maya's words. "Stolen? How did that happen? I thought you were careful with your things." Mia sighed, the tension evident in her voice. "I know, Jake, it was stupid of me. I went to get a newspaper and must have left it at the cashier's counter. When I came back, it was gone." Jake's mind raced, questions bubbling up despite his efforts to stay calm. "Did you report it to the hotel? Have you canceled the credit cards?" "Yes, I canceled the cards already," Maya replied, her voice sounding slightly relieved. "Joy, my boss, is arranging for new cards to be sent overnight. She's also transferring some money to help cover expenses." Jake nodded absent-mindedly, his thoughts spinning with the implications. "I'll handle the credit cards and insurance. Did you lose anything else important?" "Just some cash and my driver's license," Maya answered. "But I'm more worried about the inconvenience and the loss of my rings." "Your rings?" Jake asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. "You mean your wedding and engagement rings?" "Yes," Maya confirmed, her tone growing more distant. "They were in my purse, too." Jake's stomach tightened with a mix of concern and suspicion. "Are you sure that's all you lost?" Mia hesitated briefly before responding, "Yes, that's all. I just want this sorted out quickly." Jake nodded, though Mia couldn't see it over the phone. "Okay, I'll take care of everything here. Just be more careful, Maya." "I will, Jake," Maya assured him, her voice softer now. "I'm sorry for the trouble." They exchanged a few more brief words before ending the call. Jake stared at the phone in his hand, a knowing feeling of unease settling in his chest. Mia's explanation seemed plausible, but something about the situation didn't sit right with him. As he returned to the breakfast table where their two children were eagerly awaiting their pancakes, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Maya's story than she was letting on. In the days following Maya's call about the stolen purse, Jake found himself unable to shake off the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Every moment of calm was interrupted by thoughts of Maya's uncharacteristic slip-up and the missing rings. Despite her reassurances, Jake's suspicions simmered beneath the surface. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Jake sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, pretending to review their family budget while actually scouring through their recent bank statements. His heart sank as he spotted irregularities, unexplained withdrawals, charges at unfamiliar places, and expenses that didn't quite add up. "Mia," Jake finally broached the subject one night as they washed dishes together. "Can we talk?" Mia turned to face him, a small frown creasing her forehead. "Sure, Jake. What's on your mind?" Jake hesitated, unsure of how to voice his growing concerns without sounding accusatory. "I've been looking at our finances, and I noticed some transactions I can't quite place. Could you help me understand them?" Mia's eyes flickered briefly with surprise before she composed herself. "Oh, those must be from work-related expenses or maybe something I forgot to mention. Let me see." Jake watched as Maya scrolled through the statements on her phone, explaining away each item with a plausible excuse. Yet the more she talked, the more Jake felt the disconnect between her words and his gut feeling. "What about the jewelry store charge?" Jake asked carefully, pointing to a recent entry. "It seems rather large." Mia's expression faltered for a moment before she replied, "Oh, that. I needed to replace a few things after the purse incident. Nothing major." "But didn't you say the only things missing were your rings?" Jake pressed gently, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination to uncover the truth. Mia hesitated, her gaze flickering away briefly. "Yes, well, I'd also lost some other jewelry. I didn't think it was important to mention." Jake nodded slowly, his mind racing with questions. He wanted to believe Maya, to trust that there was a reasonable explanation for everything. Yet doubts continued to nibble at the edges of his certainty. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed, Jake found himself sitting alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at a photo of their wedding day displayed on the mantel. The image of Maya smiling up at him seemed to mock his uncertainty. "I need to know the truth," Jake muttered to himself, his resolve hardening. He reached for his phone, opening Maya's recent browser history and messages, searching for any clue that might confirm or dispel his suspicions. As he scrolled through mundane emails and text exchanges, Jake's eyes caught on a name he didn't recognize. A string of messages between Maya and someone labeled as Alex. The conversation seemed innocuous at first glance, but a closer read revealed a familiarity that made Jake's stomach churn. "Why are you still awake?" Jake jumped at the sound of Maya's voice, startling him from his thoughts. He quickly locked his phone, forcing a smile as Maya entered the room. "Just couldn't sleep. Are you okay?" Mia nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yeah, just restless. I'm going to bed. Good night, Jake." "Good night," Jake replied, watching Maya retreat down the hallway to their bedroom. Alone once more, he stared at his phone, contemplating his next move. The evidence was mounting, and Jake knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. As days turned into weeks, Jake's suspicions about Maya's fidelity gnawed at him relentlessly. Every interaction, every glance exchanged between them was tinged with an unspoken tension. Despite his best efforts to bury his doubts, they surfaced whenever Mia was away on one of her business trips. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Jake found himself pacing the living room, unable to shake off the feeling that he needed answers. He picked up Maya's phone, feeling a surge of guilt and desperation as he unlocked it, scrolling through her messages with Alex. The exchanges, though seemingly innocent, hinted at a closeness that made Jake's heart sink. "Mia," Jake finally confronted her one quiet night as they sat together on the couch, the dim glow of the TV casting flickering shadows across the room. "We need to talk." Mia turned to face him, her eyes narrowing slightly with concern. "About what, Jake?" He hesitated, steeling himself for the conversation he had been avoiding for weeks. "I've been feeling uneasy, Maya, about everything that's been happening lately." Her brows furrowed, and she set her book aside, giving him her full attention. "What do you mean, uneasy?" "It's about the purse incident, the expenses, and Alex," Jake admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen your messages with him, Maya. You talk to him a lot." Mia's expression flickered with surprise, quickly replaced by a mask of confusion. "Jake, Alex is just a friend. We work together, that's all." Jake shook his head, his frustration and hurt bubbling to the surface. "It's more than that, Maya. The way you talk to him, the things you say, it's like you're hiding something." Maya's gaze faltered, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. "Jake, I don't know what you want me to say. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" Jake shot back, his voice rising slightly. "Because every time I try to talk to you about it, you deflect or brush it off. I can't ignore the signs anymore, Maya." Tension crackled between them, the weight of unspoken accusations hanging heavily in the air. Mia looked away, her fingers fidgeting nervously in her lap. "I'm sorry if you feel that way, Jake. I never meant to." "To what?" Jake interrupted, his voice laced with bitterness. "To make me doubt you. To make me question everything?" "I love you, Jake," Maya insisted, her voice wavering with emotion. "You have to believe me." Jake closed his eyes briefly, struggling to contain his emotions. "I want to believe you, Maya, but I need to know the truth. Are you being honest with me?" Maya met his gaze, her eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, Jake, I swear." Their conversation ended in an uneasy silence, both retreating into their thoughts. Jake wrestled with his doubts, torn between wanting to trust Maya and needing to confront the possibility of betrayal. As the night wore on, sleep eluded him, his mind consumed with questions and uncertainties about their marriage and Maya's fidelity. Weeks of mounting suspicion and sleepless nights pushed Jake to make a decision he never thought he would: hiring a private detective. He couldn't ignore the signs any longer, and the need for concrete answers outweighed his fear of what he might uncover. One rainy afternoon, Jake sat in his home office, staring at the business card of a detective agency he found online. His fingers tapped nervously on the desk as he debated whether to make the call. Finally, with a deep breath, he dialed the number. "Good afternoon, this is Reed Investigations. How can I help you?" A gruff voice answered on the other end. Jake hesitated for a moment before speaking. Yes, I am interested in hiring a detective. I need to find out some information about my wife. There was a brief pause before the detective responded. I see. Could you provide me with some details? What exactly do you need to know? Jake swallowed hard, steeling himself for the conversation. I suspect my wife might be having an affair. I need someone to investigate her activities, gather evidence. I need to know the truth. The detective, Mr. Reed, listened intently, asking pertinent questions about Maya's routines, places she frequented, and any suspicious behavior Jake had noticed. After a lengthy discussion, they agreed on the scope of the investigation and the terms of engagement. Several days later, Jake met with Mr. Reed in a small, nondescript office downtown. The detective spread out maps, photos, and notes across the table, outlining his plan of action. We'll start by conducting surveillance, Mr. Reed explained, pointing to various locations Maya was known to visit. We'll monitor her movements, document any interactions, and gather evidence discreetly. Jake nodded, his stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and determination. And, do you think you'll find anything? Mr. Reed regarded him solemnly. I can't make promises, Mr. Johnson, but I'll do everything in my power to uncover the truth. The detective's words offered little comfort, but Jake knew he had crossed a line he couldn't retreat from. As he left the office, a weight lifted off his shoulders, replaced by a new kind of uncertainty. He couldn't help but wonder what the investigation would reveal and what it would mean for his marriage. Days stretched into weeks as Jake waited anxiously for updates from Mr. Reed. Each passing day deepened his unease, the knowledge that his marriage hung in the balance weighing heavily on his mind. He tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children's sake, but the tension between him and Maya was palpable. One evening as they sat down for dinner, Maya glanced at Jake with a furrowed brow. Is everything okay, Jake? You've been distant lately. Jake forced a smile, masking his inner turmoil. I'm fine, Maya, just tired. She studied him for a moment, concern etched in her features. You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, we can figure it out together. Her words pierced through Jake's resolve, reminding him of the love and trust they once shared. But beneath Maya's concern, he couldn't shake the haunting suspicion that everything was about to change. Weeks of mounting suspicion and sleepless nights pushed Jake to make a decision he never thought he would: hiring a private detective. He couldn't ignore the signs any longer, and the need for concrete answers outweighed his fear of what he might uncover. One rainy afternoon, Jake sat in his home office, staring at the business card of a detective agency he found online. His fingers tapped nervously on the desk as he debated whether to make the call. Finally, with a deep breath, he dialed the number. Good afternoon, this is Reed Investigations. How can I help you? A gruff voice answered on the other end. Jake hesitated for a moment before speaking. Yes, I am interested in hiring a detective. I need to find out some information about my wife. There was a brief pause before the detective responded. I see. Could you provide me with some details? What exactly do you need to know? Jake swallowed hard, steeling himself for the conversation. I suspect my wife might be having an affair. I need someone to investigate her activities, gather evidence. I need to know the truth. The detective, Mr. Reed, listened intently, asking pertinent questions about Maya's routine. Days stretched into weeks as Jake waited anxiously for updates from Mr. Reed. Each passing day deepened his unease, the knowledge that his marriage hung in the balance weighing heavily on his mind. He tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children's sake, but the tension between him and Maya was palpable. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Maya glanced at Jake with a furrowed brow. Is everything okay, Jake? You've been distant lately. Jake forced a smile, masking his inner turmoil. I'm fine, Maya. Just tired. She studied him for a moment, concern etched in her features. You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, we can figure it out together. Her words pierced through Jake's resolve, reminding him of the love and trust they once shared. But beneath Maya's concern, he couldn't shake the haunting suspicion that everything was about to change. The days stretched into weeks as Jake waited anxiously for any sign of progress from the detective. Each passing moment intensified his inner turmoil, leaving him caught between hope and dread. Then one fateful afternoon, Jake received a call from Mr. Reed that would shatter whatever fragile peace remained in his life. "Mr. Johnson," Mr. Reed's voice was grave over the phone. "I have some findings I need to discuss with you. Can we meet?" Jake's heart raced as he agreed to meet at the detective's office later that day. He arrived with a mix of apprehension and a desperate need for closure. Mr. Reed greeted him with a somber expression, ushering him into a small meeting room where photos and documents lay scattered on the table. "I've gathered some evidence regarding your wife's activities," Mr. Reed began, his tone measured. "I'll walk you through what we found." Jake nodded, steeling himself for the truth he had sought yet dreaded to hear. The detective pointed to photos taken from a discreet distance. A hotel lobby, Maya entering with a man who wasn't Jake, smiles exchanged that spoke of familiarity beyond mere acquaintanceship. "We observed Mia meeting this man on multiple occasions," Mr. Reed continued, his voice steady. "They spend time together in hotels, restaurants. It's clear from these photos that their relationship extends beyond professional boundaries." Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his chest tightening with each word. The evidence laid bare before him shattered any remaining illusions. How long has this been going on?" Jake managed to choke out, his voice barely above a whisper. "From what we've gathered, it appears to have been going on for several months," Mr. Reed replied carefully, watching Jake's reaction. Jake sank into a chair, his mind reeling with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and profound sadness. "And is there more?" Mr. Reed hesitated briefly before handing Jake a file containing financial records, a trail of expenditures that didn't align with Maya's explanations, transactions linked to hotels and restaurants where Mia and the man had been observed. "These are withdrawals and charges we traced to Maya's accounts," Mr. Reed explained. "They coincide with the times and places we documented her meetings with this man." Jake leafed through the documents numbly, the weight of the evidence pressing down on him. Each page seemed to confirm what he had feared most, that Maya's betrayal wasn't just a suspicion but a harsh reality he couldn't escape. "What do I do now?" Jake asked finally, his voice hollow with resignation. Mr. Reed regarded him sympathetically. "That's a decision only you can make, Mr. Johnson. I can continue gathering more evidence if you need, or we can discuss your options moving forward." Jake nodded, a sense of determination settling over him amidst the turmoil. "I need some time to think. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for everything." As Jake left the detective's office, his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The certainty he had sought now lay before him, stark and undeniable. Mia's betrayal had torn their life apart, leaving Jake to grapple with the shattered remnants of trust and love he once held dear. Armed with the devastating evidence gathered by Mr. Reed, Jake made the difficult decision to end his marriage to Mia. The weight of betrayal hung heavy on his shoulders, but he knew he couldn't continue living a lie. With resolve hardening his heart, Jake sought legal counsel and initiated the process of serving Mia with divorce papers. On a brisk Monday morning, Jake stood outside Maya's workplace, his heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. He clutched the envelope containing the divorce papers tightly in his hand, each step closer to the entrance feeling like a mile. As Maya exited the building, her face lit up with surprise at seeing Jake waiting for her. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Her voice wavered with confusion, the air thick with tension between them. Without a word, Jake extended the envelope towards her. "Mia, I think we need to talk," he said evenly, his voice betraying none of the turmoil raging inside. Mia's eyes widened as she took the envelope from him, her hands trembling slightly. She glanced down at the papers, her breath catching in her throat as the reality of Jake's actions sank in. "Jake, please, let's not do this here," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shook his head, his resolve firm. "I'm sorry, Maya, but I can't ignore what's been happening. This isn't just about us anymore." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she looked up at him, her voice breaking. "Jake, please, I made a mistake. I can explain." "There's nothing left to explain," Jake interrupted gently, though his heart ached at the sight of Maya's distress. "I've seen the evidence, Maya. It's over." Mia took a step back, as if the weight of Jake's words physically pushed her. She stared at him, searching for words that could bridge the chasm between them. "What about the kids, Jake? What are we going to tell them?" Jake's chest tightened at the mention of Jeremy and Melissa, their innocent faces flashing through his mind. "We'll figure it out," he replied quietly. "But right now, I need you to understand, it's over between us." Mia nodded numbly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. With a heavy heart, Jake turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing alone on the sidewalk. His footsteps echoed hollowly in his ears as he navigated the uncertain path ahead, grappling with the wreckage of a marriage shattered by betrayal and lies. In the aftermath of serving Mia with divorce papers, Jake found himself navigating through a turbulent sea of emotions. The decision to end their marriage weighed heavily on his heart, but the certainty of Maya's betrayal gave him a grim resolve to move forward. Yet, amidst the emotional wreckage, Jake had to confront the practical realities and the impact on their children. As Jake settled into the solitude of their home after the confrontation, he felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The once familiar surroundings now felt foreign, echoes of their life together haunting every corner. He focused on maintaining a sense of normalcy for Jeremy and Melissa, shielding them from the storm that had engulfed their parents' marriage. One evening, as Jake tucked Melissa into bed, she looked up at him with innocent eyes that held a hint of concern. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with confusion. Jake hesitated, his heart aching at the innocence lost in his daughter's gaze. Mommy had to go away for a while, sweetheart," he replied carefully, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. Melissa frowned slightly, sensing the weight in her father's words. "Is Mommy coming back?" she pressed, her voice wavering with uncertainty. Jake took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "Not right now, honey," he admitted gently, his voice thick with emotion. "But we'll always love Mommy, no matter what." Melissa nodded solemnly, her small hand gripping Jake's tightly. "I miss Mommy," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I miss her too, Melissa," Jake murmured, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "But we're going to be okay. We'll get through this together." Meanwhile, the practicalities of divorce loomed large. Jake met with lawyers, sorted through financial documents, and began the process of dividing their assets. Each decision felt like another blow to the life they had built together, a stark reminder of the betrayal that tore it apart. One afternoon, Jake received a call from Maya's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss custody arrangements for Jeremy and Melissa. As he sat across the table from Maya in a sterile conference room, their eyes met briefly, the silence heavy with unspoken regrets and accusations. "I want what's best for the kids, Jake," Maya finally spoke, her voice strained with emotion. "I know I've made mistakes, but I love them more than anything." Jake nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "They're everything to me too, Maya. But things can't go back to how they were." "I know," Mia whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Jake looked away, struggling to contain his own emotions. "Neither did I, Maya, but we have to focus on the future now." The meeting stretched on with discussions about visitation schedules, child support, and co-parenting agreements. They navigated through the legalities with a mix of determination and resignation, both knowing that their marriage had irreparably changed. As Jake left the meeting, his mind raced with the weight of their shared history and uncertain futures. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, marked by healing wounds and rebuilding lives shattered by betrayal. But amidst the pain and turmoil, he found solace in the unwavering love he held for Jeremy and Melissa, a beacon of hope guiding them through the storm.